Only in America would a black woman think she's worth $700 million. Zhao Ming's laughter sliced through the room, the translation smooth enough for the foreign investors to snicker along. He leaned back in his silk chair, smirking toward Naomi Ellison as if she were decoration, not the architect of the empire he was begging to merge with. "Our servant looks tense," he added in Mandarin, the phrase "Hey Nu Yongren, black servant," rolling off his tongue with lazy cruelty. What he didn't know was that Naomi understood every word. Her expression never changed. They thought they were laughing at a powerless woman, but none of them realized she was seconds away from ending a $700 million deal that would bury them all. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The sleek private jet cut through clouds as Dr. Naomi Ellison studied the merger documents for the 100th time. Her reading glasses perched on her nose as she flipped through the pages, each one representing a piece of the $700 million deal with Zhao Industries. The cabin lights cast a warm glow across the polished table, highlighting her perfectly pressed navy suit and the slight furrow in her brow. "Dr. Ellison," Kiana Brooks called from the seat across from her, "you've been at those papers for 6 hours straight. Maybe it's time for a break?" Naomi looked up, her dark eyes sharp despite the long flight. "You know what my mother always said about breaks, Kiana?" She straightened the papers with practiced precision. "Predators hunt the moment you blink." Kiana nodded, understanding in her eyes. At 28, she'd already seen enough of corporate America to know the truth in those words. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." Cleaning other people's houses taught her more about power than any MBA program could. Naomi's fingers traced the edge of the contract. She saw how the powerful act when they think no one's watching. The jet began its descent into Beijing Capital International Airport. Through the window, the sprawling city emerged from beneath the clouds, a maze of modern skyscrapers and ancient traditions. Naomi slipped the documents into her leather briefcase, each movement deliberate and controlled. "Their heir apparent will be meeting us," Kiana said, checking her tablet. "Zhao Ming, Harvard MBA, took over their international division 3 years ago." "And what's not in the official bio?" Naomi asked, though she already knew the answer. 3 harassment complaints buried by Daddy's lawyers, 2 ex-wives who signed NDAs, and a reputation for, Kiana paused, choosing her words carefully, traditional views about leadership. Naomi's lip curved slightly. Traditional. That's a polite way of saying he doesn't think women should run companies, especially not black women. The jet touched down smoothly, taxiing to a private terminal where a small welcoming party waited on the tarmac. Through the window, Naomi spotted the cameras first, local press, all carefully selected by Zhao Industries' PR team. Then she saw him, Zhao Ming, standing front and center in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Game face," Naomi murmured, rising from her seat. She checked her reflection in a compact mirror, ensuring every hair was in place, her makeup flawless. In this world, perfection wasn't vanity, it was armor. The cabin door opened, and Beijing's autumn air rushed in. Naomi descended the stairs with practiced grace, Kiana 2 steps behind her. Camera shutters clicked rapidly, recording every moment of the American CEO's arrival. Zhao Ming stepped forward, his smile too wide, too practiced. He was handsome in that polished way of men born to wealth, every feature arranged to project authority without earning it. He extended his hand, and Naomi took it. His grip lingered too long, fingers pressing into her skin with subtle dominance. "Dr. Ellison," he said, his English perfect from years at American schools. "What a pleasure." So they sent the diversity hire herself. The cameras kept clicking. Naomi's smile never wavered, though she felt her jaw tighten. Around them, his entourage pretended not to hear, their faces carefully blank. The comment hung in the air like smoke, impossible to grab, but unmistakably there. "Mr. Zhao," she replied, her voice smooth as silk. "Thank you for the welcome. Shall we discuss the future of energy innovation?" He laughed, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, always straight to business with Americans. My father is eager to meet you." His gaze slid over her in a way that had nothing to do with business. They walked toward the waiting cars, a fleet of black luxury vehicles with tinted windows. Kiana stayed close, her tablet ready, her posture alert. She'd seen that look in Ming's eyes, too. In the back of the lead car, Naomi finally allowed herself to move her hand, carefully wiping it against a tissue. The scent of his cologne, too strong, too assertive, clung to her skin like a warning. "Did you get that on record?" she asked Kiana quietly. "Audio and video," Kiana confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Though they'll probably say it was a translation issue. They always do." Naomi watched the Beijing streets blur past the window. Modern buildings reached for the sky, their glass surfaces reflecting a city racing toward the future. But some things remained stubbornly in the past. "One wrong word from him," she whispered, more to herself than to Kiana, "and this deal dies." The tissue in her hand crumpled slightly, the only outward sign of the steel beneath her composed exterior. She'd faced men like Zhao Ming before, men who saw her position as an affront to the natural order, who thought her success must be a gift rather than earned. Men who believed power was their birthright, but they never seemed to learn. Power wasn't inherited. It was built, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice. And Naomi Ellison had built herself into someone who could shake the foundations of empires with a single word. The car glided to a stop outside Zhao Industries headquarters, a towering testament to wealth and influence. As Naomi gathered her briefcase, she caught her reflection in the tinted window. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Baby, sometimes the best revenge is letting them think they've won. Right until the moment they lose everything." The marble floors of Zhao Industries headquarters echoed with each step, as Naomi followed Ming through corridors that screamed old money. Everything gleamed, the walls, the floors, even the anxious faces of assistants who bowed as they passed. Their footsteps created a steady rhythm against the stone, like a countdown to something inevitable. "Our history spans 3 generations," Ming announced, gesturing to a wall lined with portraits. Each frame contained the same basic image: stern-faced men in dark suits, their expressions carved from the same stone as the building itself. "My grandfather started with a single coal mine. Now we power half of Asia." Naomi studied each portrait, noting the progression of wealth in their suits, the growing confidence in their poses. "Impressive legacy," she said, her voice neutral. "Very impressive," Ming agreed, his smile sharp. "We believe in traditional values here: strong leadership, clear hierarchy." He paused before a particularly large portrait. "My father, Chairman Zhao Wei. He taught me that success comes from order, from knowing one's place." The emphasis on place wasn't subtle. Neither was the way his eyes flicked to her, measuring her reaction. "In America," he continued, switching to Mandarin, "they think anyone can lead, even if they lack proper background." He smiled wider, certain she couldn't understand. "Like putting a monkey in silk robes." Naomi's face remained perfectly composed, though her fingers tightened slightly on her briefcase. The insult hung in the air, wrapped in the false security of a foreign tongue. They reached a set of ornate doors where Chairman Zhao Wei waited with an entourage of executives. The chairman was everything his portrait suggested: elegant, reserved, radiating quiet authority. He bowed slightly, perfectly polite, but his eyes never quite met Naomi's. "Dr. Ellison," he said, his English careful and precise. "Welcome to our humble home." The boardroom could never be described as humble. A massive table of polished rosewood dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most cars. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Beijing's skyline, the city sprawling beneath them like a kingdom. Lunch was served as they discussed preliminary terms: delicate dim sum, premium tea, every detail orchestrated to display wealth and control. Naomi noticed how the serving staff kept their eyes down, how they seemed to fade into the walls between courses. "The American market is challenging," one of the senior executives remarked, helping himself to more tea. "So many regulations, so many demands for representation." He chuckled, a sound like ice cracking. "And the women there, such strong opinions, such loud voices." Other executives joined his laughter, a chorus of artificial amusement. Chairman Zhao's face remained neutral, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. Ming didn't even try to hide his smirk. Naomi set down her teacup with precise control. "Volume rarely correlates with impact," she said, her voice carrying the weight of every degree she'd earned, every barrier she'd broken. "True power speaks for itself." Her eyes met the executives, and the laughter died. Something in her gaze, the quiet certainty, the unshakable dignity, turned the temperature in the room several degrees colder. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum, sucking the smugness from their faces. Chairman Zhao cleared his throat. "Shall we review the proposed timeline?" The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Naomi noticed how they began watching her more carefully, like men who'd suddenly realized they might be standing on thin ice. Hours later, in her hotel suite, Naomi stood at the window watching Beijing's lights flicker to life. The city looked different from this height, less intimidating, more vulnerable. She pulled out her phone and dialed Kiana's room. "Did you get everything?" she asked when Kiana answered. "Every word," Kiana confirmed. "Both languages, including Ming's charming monkey comment." Naomi's reflection smiled back at her from the window. "Good. They think speaking Mandarin makes them invisible. That's exactly what we need." "The chairman's more careful than his son," Kiana observed, "but that comment about loud women shows exactly what they think of us." Naomi touched the cool glass, her fingertip tracing the outline of the Zhao Industries building in the distance. "They see our voices as a threat because they've never had to fight to be heard. So what's our play?" Naomi watched a plane cut through the night sky, its lights steady and determined. Tomorrow they'll see how loud quiet can be. The city continued to pulse below, millions of lives intersecting in countless ways. But up here, in this carefully appointed suite, one woman stood perfectly still, her silence more dangerous than any shout could ever be. The lights of Beijing reflected in her eyes, and in their glow, she looked less like a visitor and more like a force of nature, patient, inevitable, and impossible to stop once set in motion. The Zhao family estate sprawled across the outskirts of Beijing like a small palace, its gardens perfectly manicured, its walls high enough to keep the real world at a comfortable distance. Inside the main dining hall, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across faces both Eastern and Western, all wearing masks of civility that grew thinner with each course. Naomi sat at the center of the long table, her emerald dress a deliberate choice. Power without provocation. The silk caught the light as she reached for her wine glass, each movement measured and elegant. She'd learned long ago that in rooms like this, even lifting a fork could be judged. Ming held court at the head of the table, his father notably absent due to pressing business matters. The younger Zhao had loosened his tie after his third glass of wine, his carefully cultivated Western manners beginning to slip. "Tell me, Dr. Ellison," he called down the table, interrupting her conversation with a British investor, Where did you study? Harvard? Yale? His tone suggested these were the only acceptable answers. MIT, Naomi replied simply, watching his reaction. Both degrees. Both? Ming's eyebrows rose with exaggerated surprise. How fortunate! They must have had excellent diversity programs. Several Western executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. A server silently replaced empty soup bowls with the next course. Shark fin soup, a display of wealth that doubled as a statement about environmental concerns. The engineering program was quite competitive, Naomi said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to make her next words cut deeper. Merit-based admission, actually, though I imagine that concept might be unfamiliar to some. A few quiet coughs around the table. Ming's smile tightened. Of course, he said, switching to what he imagined was an African accent, thick and caricatured. We are all very impressed with your achievements. He looked around the table, seeking approval. In America, everyone gets trophy. Yes, everyone wins. Several Chinese executives laughed openly. The Western investors managed nervous chuckles, their eyes darting between Ming and Naomi, measuring the distance between social discomfort and business necessity. Naomi noted each face, each laugh, each cowardly compromise. Her memory was excellent. It had to be. Growing up where forgetting who stood with you and who stood against you could break you. The soup arrived in elegant bowls, steam rising like spirits seeking escape. Naomi watched the fins float in the broth, endangered species served with silver spoons. More symbols, more statements. You know, Ming continued, emboldened by the previous laughter, my father worried about this partnership. He said American companies lack discipline, proper respect for hierarchy. He gestured with his wine glass. But I told him, sometimes we must adapt to new ways, yes? Even if they are... He paused, searching for the word, unexpected. Progress often is, Naomi replied, her tone so perfectly pleasant it could cut glass. Like sharks, we must keep moving forward, or die. The soup suddenly seemed less appetizing to several guests. A gentle chime broke the tension. Naomi's phone set discreetly beside her plate. She glanced at the screen, then stood with fluid grace. Please, excuse me, she said. I need to take this call. As she turned to leave, Ming leaned toward his closest companions, switching to Mandarin with the casual confidence of someone certain they couldn't be understood. Hey Nu Yong Ren, he said, the slur rolling off his tongue. Black servant. Laughter rippled around the table, starting with the Chinese executives and spreading uncertainly to some of the Western guests. The kind of laughter that comes from wanting to belong, from fear of being excluded from power's inner circle. Naomi's step faltered for just a moment. In that pause, time seemed to crystallize. She could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, each pulse a reminder of every moment like this one, every smile she'd maintained while swallowing rage, every lesson her mother had taught her about dignity being armor. The chandelier light caught her earrings as she resumed walking, each step precise, unhurried. The laughter followed her to the door, but it couldn't touch her. She'd learned long ago that true power isn't in the ability to hurt others. It's in the ability to walk away, gathering their mistakes like ammunition, waiting for the perfect moment to show them exactly who they'd underestimated. The dining room door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow seemed louder than all the laughter combined. In the hallway, surrounded by ancient Chinese artifacts worth millions, Naomi stood perfectly still. She didn't clench her fists or let her face show anything but perfect composure. Instead, she took one deep breath, then another, each one fueling the fire of determination that had carried her from a small house in Atlanta to this moment. The phone in her hand hadn't actually rung. It was a tool, like everything else. The dress, the smile, even this strategic retreat. Each piece carefully chosen, each moment choreographed toward an end they couldn't yet see. Behind those doors, they were still laughing, still certain of their superiority, still believing that power was measured in cruelty and wealth. They couldn't hear her silence, couldn't recognize it for what it was. Not submission, but the calm before a storm. They would learn, as so many others had, that underestimating Naomi Ellison was like mistaking a sleeping lion for a house cat. A mistake you only make once. Naomi smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in a gilded mirror, and pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the dining room. The laughter that had followed her out died mid-breath. She moved to her seat with measured grace, every eye in the room tracking her movement. Ming was still wearing his self-satisfied smile, though it flickered slightly when she met his gaze directly. The shark fin soup had grown cold, crystalline patterns forming on its surface like ice on a pond. "My sincerest apologies for the interruption," Naomi said, in perfect Mandarin, her pronunciation crisp and clear. "I wanted to properly thank you for this excellent meal." The silence that followed was absolute. Ming's face drained of color so quickly he seemed to age years in seconds. Around the table, expressions shifted from confusion to dawning horror as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. A wine glass toppled, spreading red across white linen like blood. "Dr. Ellison," Ming stammered in English, "I didn't realize—" "Clearly," Naomi continued in Mandarin, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Though I'm curious, would it have mattered? Would knowing I understood have stopped you from showing exactly who you are?" She stood slowly, placing her napkin beside her plate with deliberate care. "I spent 2 years at Shanghai University's graduate program. My Mandarin professor said I had a gift for subtle tones." Her smile was razor-sharp. "For catching nuances others might miss." The Western executives were shifting in their seats, reading the room's tension even without understanding the words. The Chinese executives sat frozen, their earlier laughter trapped in their throats. As CEO of Ellison Global Renewables, she switched to English, ensuring everyone would understand what came next. "I am hereby terminating all merger negotiations with Zhao Industries, effective immediately." She paused, letting the words sink in. A servant doesn't sign billion-dollar partnerships. She ends them. Chairs scraped against marble floors as people rose in panic. Ming shot to his feet, his face now flushed with desperate anger. "You cannot do this. The contracts are unsigned," Naomi cut him off, "and will remain so." She turned to address the room. "I suggest everyone check their phones. My team is releasing a statement to the press as we speak, along with recordings of tonight's entertainment." A chorus of notification chimes filled the air as if on cue. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, like flowers blooming in fast motion. The sound of multiple sharp intakes of breath followed. "You recorded us?" Ming's voice cracked. "That's illegal." "In China, yes," Naomi agreed. "But in international business meetings, my company's policy is to maintain complete records for transparency. It's clearly stated in our preliminary agreements, the ones you clearly didn't bother to read carefully." Another mistake. She began walking toward the door, her heels clicking against marble in the stunned silence. "Oh, and Mr. Zhao?" She turned back. "The next time you want to insult someone, you might want to check their credentials first. MIT has an excellent international program." The room erupted into chaos behind her. Voices raised in multiple languages, Mandarin, English, French, German, all with the same note of panic. $700 million were evaporating like morning dew, and with them, countless careers and reputations. In the grand foyer, Kiana was waiting with Naomi's coat. Her assistant's eyes were bright with barely contained excitement, her phone already buzzing continuously in her hand. "Car's ready," Kiana said, holding the coat open. "And the press release went live 2 minutes ago. It's already trending." They walked out into the cool Beijing night, leaving the sounds of disorder behind them. The garden's carefully arranged stones and trees seemed to bow in the evening breeze, as if acknowledging their passage. The limousine door closed with a solid thunk, sealing them in climate-controlled quiet. Kiana's phone continued to vibrate, headlines flashing across its screen faster than she could read them. Ellison Global cancels major Chinese merger. Shock at Zhao Industries. Dinner. Deal collapses. Breaking. Racist remarks. Torpedo 700 Menators energy deal. Through the tinted windows, the Zhao estate's lights grew smaller, its perfectly manicured grounds receding into the darkness. Naomi watched it disappear, her face illuminated by the passing streetlights, each flash revealing the same composed expression she'd worn all evening. "Social media is exploding," Kiana reported, scrolling through her feeds. "The recording is everywhere. CNN is calling for comment. So is Bloomberg. The Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive." She looked up. "What should I tell them?" Naomi continued staring out the window, watching Beijing's modern skyline rise before them, all glass and steel and ambition. "Good," she said simply. "Let them talk." In the reflection of the window, she could see her own face superimposed over the city lights, clear-eyed, unshaken, exactly as her mother had taught her to be. In her mind, she could hear her mother's voice. "Baby, sometimes the biggest victory is just walking away with your head high." The limousine glided through the night, carrying them toward the airport where the company jet waited. Behind them, an empire built on arrogance was learning an expensive lesson about underestimating the wrong person. Ahead, headlines were spreading across the globe, carrying not just news of a failed deal, but a message about power, respect, and the cost of casual cruelty. The Beijing sunrise painted the city in shades of amber and gold, but Naomi had been awake long before dawn. She stood at her hotel suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, watching digital stock tickers scroll across the sides of skyscrapers. Ellison Global's stock was flashing in angry red, down 12%, and falling. Below, a swarm of reporters clustered around the hotel's main entrance like anxious bees. Security guards formed a human barrier, keeping the press at bay. Camera flashes punctuated the morning light, even from 30 floors up. "They're saying it's the biggest deal collapse in clean energy history," Kiana said from her position at the suite's dining table, surrounded by tablets and laptops. She hadn't slept either. Her usually pristine blazer was slightly wrinkled, coffee cups scattered around her workstation. Chinese social media is split between outrage and, well, more outrage. But Western outlets are calling it a watershed moment for corporate accountability. Naomi's phone buzzed again, the 20th call from David Levin in the past hour. She'd been ignoring them all, but this time she picked up. The video call connected, revealing her CFO's face, flushed with barely contained fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" David's voice crackled through the speaker. His usually perfectly combed hair was disheveled, his collar askew. "The board is in chaos. Our investors are panicking. You humiliated them." "Good morning to you too, David." Naomi's tone was winter cold. "I trust you've seen the recording?" "Of course I've seen it. Everyone has seen it. But you can't tank a $700 million deal over a few racist comments." "A few racist comments?" Naomi's eyebrow arched. "Is that what we're calling it now? And here I thought you were the one who taught me about protecting shareholder value through reputation management." David's face reddened further. "This isn't about reputation. This is about—" He stopped, seeming to catch himself. "Look, we can still salvage this. Ming's father is willing to meet. We can renegotiate. Interesting timing for that suggestion, Naomi cut in. Speaking of negotiations, would you care to explain why new patent transfer clauses appeared in the contract overnight? The ones that weren't in the version I reviewed on the flight? David blinked rapidly, his hand reaching up to adjust his tie. There must be some mistake, perhaps a translation error. In a contract drafted by our own legal team? Naomi's voice was dangerously soft. Try again, David. I'll have to check with legal. But Naomi, please, just focus on the bigger picture here. The board meeting is in 4 hours, and they're going to want answers. Oh, they'll get answers. Naomi ended the call mid-sentence, turning to Kiana. What did you find? Kiana's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up a complex web of financial diagrams. It took all night, but I found it. The new patent clauses? They're connected to a series of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. She highlighted a particular node in the network. This one was established 3 weeks ago, right after our first meeting with Zhao Industries. And guess who's listed as the beneficial owner? Ming, Naomi said, not a question. Through 6 layers of corporate veils. But yes. Kiana pulled up another document. The clauses would have given them backdoor access to our core solar panel technology. They could have replicated our entire production line within 6 months. Naomi moved to stand behind Kiana, studying the diagrams. Years of experience reading financial structures let her see the theft attempt hidden in the legitimate-looking paperwork. It was elegant in its complexity, she had to admit. If she hadn't caught Ming's insult, if she hadn't killed the deal, they weren't just trying to partner with us, she said quietly. They were planning to gut us. Take our technology, replicate it cheaper, and push us out of the Asian market entirely. She straightened up, smoothing her jacket. And someone on our side helped them set it up. David? Kiana asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. The timing of the contract changes, the rushed closing schedule, the way he's pushing to salvage the deal even after what happened. Naomi shook her head. He's been their man from the start. We just need to prove it. A knock at the door made them both turn. A hotel staff member entered with a silver breakfast tray, complete with fresh coffee and pastries. As she set it down, Naomi noticed her hands trembling slightly. Pardon, Doctor. Ellison, the young woman said in careful English. But security asked me to inform you. There are now over 50 reporters in the lobby. They're requesting statements. Thank you, Naomi replied with a warm smile. And thank you for bringing breakfast, despite the crowd. After the staff member left, Kiana stood up, stretching muscles stiff from hours of computer work. What's our next move? Naomi walked back to the window. The morning sun had risen fully now, glinting off the steel and glass towers of Beijing's financial district. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Ming was probably scrambling to contain the damage, never suspecting they'd discovered the real plot hidden behind his racist bluster. They called me servant while trying to steal my crown, Naomi said, her reflection in the window overlaying the city like a ghost. Now we take theirs. She turned to Kiana. Start with David's emails from the past month. Every contact, every meeting, every document he's touched. If he helped them set this up, he left tracks somewhere. Kiana was already typing. And Ming? He wanted to play with racism and corporate theft? Naomi's smile was sharp as a blade's edge. Let's show him what happens when you try both against the wrong person. The morning news cycle hit like a tsunami. Naomi watched from her hotel room as talking heads dissected her every move, her every word from the fateful dinner. On CNN, a commentator with perfectly coiffed hair shook his head solemnly. Sources close to the negotiations suggest Dr. Ellison may have misinterpreted cultural differences, he said. This emotional response could cost shareholders billions. Naomi muted the TV, her finger pressing the button with controlled force. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Social media was having a field day. The messages ranged from concerned to cruel, with an ugly undercurrent of racism threading through many of them. "They're calling you unstable on WeChat," Kiana reported, scrolling through her tablet. "And Twitter. Well, you don't want to know what's trending. Let me guess. #AngryBlackWoman." Naomi's voice was dry as dust. "Among others." Kiana's face darkened. "The trolls are out in force. I've had to shut down comments on all our corporate social media." Naomi stood, walking to her closet. She pulled out a simple black sweater and jeans, clothes that would help her blend in rather than stand out. "I need some air." "You can't go out there," Kiana protested. "The media is still camped downstairs, and security says—" "I didn't survive 2 decades in corporate America without learning how to move unseen." Naomi pulled her hair back into a tight bun, added large sunglasses and a surgical mask, common enough in Beijing that it wouldn't draw attention. "Keep monitoring the situation. I'll be back in 2 hours." The service elevator deposited her in the hotel's kitchen area. A few workers glanced her way, but in her plain clothes, she was just another foreigner trying to avoid attention. She slipped out through the loading dock and into the bustling streets of Beijing's business district. All around her, life continued as normal. Street vendors hawked their wares, office workers hurried between skyscrapers, tourists snapped photos of the modern architecture. But in cafes and on street corners, she caught fragments of conversation. Her Mandarin picked up whispers that made her jaw clench. "That American woman. Lost face over nothing. These foreigners. So sensitive." In a high-end coffee shop, 2 young executives in sharp suits didn't bother to lower their voices as she passed their table. "Who does she think she is?" one said in Mandarin. "These Americans, especially the black ones, they don't understand how to do business here." His companion laughed. Ming Zhao was right. Too emotional. No control. Naomi ordered her coffee in perfect Mandarin, watching their faces pale as they realized she'd understood every word. She took her drink to a corner table, opening her phone to find Ming's face plastered across Chinese business news sites. His official statement was a masterpiece of subtle condescension. "While we respect Dr. Ellison's passion, her emotional reaction to standard business negotiations raises concerns about her ability to operate in international markets. We remain open to dialogue once cooler heads prevail." The translation didn't capture all the nuances. The way his choice of words in Mandarin painted her as hysterical, unstable, out of her depth. The comments below the articles were worse, a cesspool of racist and sexist vitriol barely disguised as business criticism. Her phone buzzed with a message from the board. They were deeply concerned about the situation and requested an emergency meeting. Another buzz, share prices dropping. Another, a major investor threatening to pull out. Naomi walked back to the hotel through darkening streets, watching her own face flash on digital billboards between advertisements. The story had legs now, spinning beyond her control. In the space of 24 hours, she'd gone from respected CEO to cautionary tale. The hotel lobby was mercifully clear of reporters when she returned, though she could see them still camped outside the main entrance. She took the service elevator again, her mind already mapping out strategies for the board meeting. The corridor to her suite was empty and quiet. Too quiet. Her security training kicked in before her conscious mind registered what was wrong. She slowed her steps, scanning for any sign of disturbance. There, a shadow under her door that shouldn't be there. A piece of paper slid through while she was out. Naomi approached cautiously, her hand sliding into her purse, where a small but powerful stun gun lay hidden. The note was printed on expensive paper, the kind used for business cards. The message was in English, each word carefully chosen, You dishonor yourself by staying. Leave China by tomorrow night, or bleed here. Some lessons must be taught harshly. Naomi picked up the note with a tissue, preserving any possible fingerprints. Inside her suite, she checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing was disturbed, but the message was clear. They could reach her whenever they wanted. She double-checked the door's bolt, then moved a chair under the handle for good measure. From her purse, she withdrew the stun gun, a gift from her head of security, who'd insisted she never travel without it. Its weight was reassuring in her hand as she checked the charge indicator. Full power. "Try me," she muttered, setting the weapon on her bedside table within easy reach. "I've faced worse than schoolyard bullies with daddy's money." The Beijing sunrise painted the hotel room in shades of gray and amber. Naomi sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of printed documents and 3 laptops. Her jacket was draped over a chair, her sleeves rolled up, ready for battle. Kiana worked at the desk, red-flagging suspicious entries in spreadsheets. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed a sleepless night, but her fingers flew over the keyboard with precision. Liang Chen, their translator and tech consultant, sat on the couch with his own laptop, his normally neat hair disheveled from running his hands through it in frustration. "Another shell company," Kiana announced, marking a cell in red. "This one registered in the Cayman Islands last year. Huge cash transfers, no clear business purpose." Naomi nodded, scanning a document recovered from Zhao Industries' backup servers. Patterns the same. They create these shells just before major international deals. She touched her temple, fighting a headache. "Liang, what's this notation here?" Liang leaned forward, squinting at Chinese characters in tiny font. "It's creative accounting. They're marking bribes as consulting fees to local officials." He pulled at his collar, clearly uncomfortable. "These amounts are significant." "Track them," Naomi ordered, passing him a USB drive. "Every yuan, every recipient." The room fell into focused silence, broken only by keyboard clicks and the rustle of papers. Outside, the city was fully awake, car horns and construction noise filtering through the windows. But up here, in their makeshift war room, they were archaeologists unearthing corruption one layer at a time. "Got something big," Kiana said after an hour. "Factory inspection reports from their solar panel plant in Xinjiang." "The numbers don't add up." Liang moved to look over her shoulder, his face paling as he read. "These worker manifests. I've seen this before. These aren't employees. They're forced labor." Naomi's head snapped up. "You're certain?" "The language is careful, but—" Liang pulled up another document, translating rapidly. "See here? Special Worker Integration Program. And these housing costs? Far below market rate because they're prison barracks." "Jesus," Kiana whispered. "Download everything," Naomi ordered. "Every report, every memo, every email chain that mentions those facilities." She stood, pacing the room. No wonder they buried these files so deep. Liang's fingers hesitated over his keyboard. "Dr. Ellison, this kind of information—" He swallowed hard. "People disappear for less. If they trace these breaches back to us—" "They already threatened me once," Naomi said, touching the note in her pocket. "But this isn't about me anymore." She moved to the window, looking out at the sprawling city. How many lives are buried in those spreadsheets? How many families torn apart so Ming can add another 0 to his bank account? "We should at least wait for legal counsel," Kiana suggested, though her tone said she already knew the answer. "Our lawyers are probably compromised," Naomi replied. "Remember those patent clauses that appeared overnight? Someone on our side helped them." She turned back to the room, her expression hard. "We trust no one outside this room." Liang stood, running both hands through his hair. "Dr. Ellison, please understand. What you're considering, it won't just hurt Zhao Industries. This could embarrass powerful people, trigger international investigations. He met her eyes. This information can get you killed. Naomi walked to him, her voice softening, but her resolve unchanged. So can silence, Liang. Every day we wait, more lives are destroyed. She touched his shoulder. But I won't force you to stay. You can walk away right now. No questions asked. He looked at the door, then at his laptop screen where damning numbers scrolled past. After a long moment, he sat back down. My father taught me that true honor means standing up to powerful men, not bowing to them. His fingers returned to the keyboard. I'm staying. Me too, Kiana said firmly. All in. They worked through the morning, building their case document by document, fake environmental impact studies, backdated safety certifications, bribes disguised as charitable donations. Every discovery revealed new layers of corruption, a cancer eating at the heart of Zhao's empire. Look at these profit margins, Kiana said, pointing to a graph. No way they're this high without cutting every corner possible. Not just corners, Liang added grimly. Lives, safety, basic human dignity. He rubbed his eyes. The deeper we dig, the worse it gets. Naomi studied a series of photos showing factory conditions. We need more than documents. Witnesses, insider testimony. She turned to Liang. Any chance your contacts might... A sharp tap on glass made them all freeze. Across the street, sunlight flashed off a camera lens. A man in a black suit stood in an office window, photographing their room with a long-range camera. Down! Naomi ordered. They dropped to the floor as she crawled to the window, keeping low. The man was already gone, leaving only empty windows reflecting morning light. Close the curtains, she told Kiana. Liang, start encrypting everything we have. Triple protection. She pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. They're watching us now. We need to move fast. The heavy curtains slid shut, plunging the room into artificial twilight. In the dim light, their laptops glowed like campfires, casting shadows on tense faces as they raced to secure their findings before the storm broke. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 2:00 a.m. in harsh red numbers. Naomi sat at the desk in her hotel room, reviewing security footage Kiana had pulled from Zhao Industries' servers. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen, but she couldn't sleep. Not with what they'd discovered. A soft click cut through the silence. Naomi's head snapped up. That wasn't the normal settling of the building. Her hand moved toward her purse, where the stun gun waited. The door burst open with a crack of splintering wood. 3 men in black masks rushed in, moving with military precision. The first one lunged for her before she could reach her purse. Naomi grabbed the desk lamp and swung hard. It connected with a satisfying crunch. The man stumbled back, cursing in Mandarin. She kicked the desk chair at the second attacker, buying precious seconds. The third man cornered her by the coffee maker. Without thinking, Naomi grabbed the pot of water she'd been heating for tea and flung the scalding liquid at his face. His scream pierced the air as he clawed at his mask. Glass shattered as they knocked over the side table. Naomi's bare feet crunched on the fragments, but adrenaline dulled the pain. She ducked a wild punch, years of kickboxing classes taking over. Her elbow found a solar plexus. Someone's nose met her knee. The door connecting to Kiana's room burst open. Her assistant charged in, wielding a wooden chair like a battering ram. She slammed it into the back of the man grappling with Naomi. "Run!" Naomi shouted, grabbing Kiana's arm. They bolted for the hallway, leaving the men tangled in furniture and cursing. Their bare feet slapped against cold tile as they sprinted for the stairwell. Behind them, heavy footsteps and angry shouts echoed off the walls. Naomi's heart hammered against her ribs. The fire exit felt miles away. They hit the stairwell at full speed, taking the steps 2 at a time. The metal door clanged shut behind them just as the fire alarm began to shriek. Red emergency lights cast everything in a hellish glow. "Keep going!" Naomi gasped as Kiana stumbled on the 10th floor. Their pursuers were gaining. She could hear them above, their boots thundering on the metal stairs. They burst out of the stairwell on the 4th floor, racing down a service corridor. A cleaning cart provided cover as they caught their breath. "Back entrance," Kiana panted, pointing. "Through the kitchen." Naomi nodded, her lungs burning. They moved as quietly as they could, bare feet silent on the industrial carpet. Behind them, the fire alarm continued its deafening wail. They made it to the kitchen just as voices shouted in Mandarin from the stairwell. The cold tile against their feet was almost welcome after the rough carpet had scraped their soles raw. "There!" One of the men spotted them through the kitchen window. Naomi grabbed a pot from the drying rack and hurled it at the window. The crash bought them precious seconds as they darted between steel counters and hanging utensils. They reached the loading dock just as police sirens began wailing in the distance. The night air hit them like a slap, raising goosebumps on their arms. They didn't stop running until they reached the busy street 2 blocks away. Only then did Naomi realize she was shaking. Her silk pajamas were torn and spattered with coffee. Blood trickled from cuts on her feet. Kiana didn't look much better, her t-shirt ripped at the shoulder, hair wild around her face. "Are you okay?" Naomi asked, grabbing Kiana's shoulders. "Yeah," Kiana nodded, still breathing hard. "You?" "I'll live." Naomi tried to steady her trembling hands. "We need to get somewhere safe. They'll be watching my backup hotel." "My cousin has an apartment in the University District," Kiana said. "She's out of town this week." They found a taxi willing to take them despite their disheveled state. As they drove through the pre-dawn streets, Naomi's phone buzzed with a message from the hotel manager. Police were investigating an apparent robbery attempt. No suspects found. Minimal evidence. "They'll bury this," Naomi said quietly. "Write it off as common criminals." "Those weren't random burglars," Kiana replied. "They moved like professionals." "Ming's men. Had to be." Naomi's jaw clenched. "He's desperate to stop us from exposing what we found." The sky was beginning to lighten when they returned to the hotel room with police escort. The destruction looked worse in the gray dawn light. Overturned furniture, shattered glass, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Blood drops stained the carpet where Naomi's knee had connected with someone's face. She pulled out her phone, hands still trembling slightly, and began photographing everything. The broken door, the lamp she'd used as a weapon, the coffee stains on the wall. Each image was evidence of how far Ming would go to protect his secrets. "They drew first blood," Naomi whispered, lowering her phone. The words tasted like iron in her mouth, like the promise of retribution. The room fell silent except for the click of her camera phone. Morning sun crept through the windows, painting the wreckage in shades of gold and shadow. Each photo was another piece of ammunition in a war that had just turned deadly serious. The private jet hummed steadily as it carried them away from Beijing. Naomi stared out the window, watching China's coastline fade into a distant smudge. Her body ached from the attack, cuts and bruises hidden beneath a crisp business suit. 2 armed security guards sat near the cockpit, a new addition she'd never needed before. Kiana dozed fitfully in the seat across from her, dark circles under her eyes betraying their sleepless nights. They'd barely rested since fleeing to her cousin's apartment, spending hours documenting everything and arranging secure transport home. "Ms. Brooks," Naomi said softly, touching her assistant's arm. "We're almost home." Kiana startled awake, instantly alert. "Any word from the office?" "David's called 4 times. Says it's urgent we meet as soon as we land." Naomi's voice was careful, measured. "He's very concerned about our safety." "Too concerned," Kiana muttered, rubbing her eyes. Where was that concern when we were actually in danger? Naomi nodded slowly. Something had been nagging at her about the attack, a detail just out of reach. She closed her eyes, replaying that violent night. The masks, the precision, the way they'd known exactly when to strike. The jet touched down in Atlanta under heavy gray skies. A corporate car waited on the tarmac, more security visible in the terminal. Naomi felt the weight of eyes on her as they walked through the airport, whispers following in their wake. The attack hadn't made international news, but rumors spread fast in business circles. Ellison Global's headquarters loomed ahead, glass and steel reaching toward storm clouds. Naomi straightened her spine, ignoring the protest of bruised ribs. She wouldn't let them see her pain. The elevator ride to the executive floor was silent. When the doors opened, David Levin stood waiting, concern etched on his polished features. "Naomi," he said, stepping forward with open arms. "Thank God you're safe." "When we heard about the attack—" She stepped past his attempted embrace, noting how his smile flickered. "Save the theatrics, David. We have work to do." His pressed suit and perfect hair seemed suddenly artificial to her. A costume rather than clothing. He followed them into her office, launching into a prepared speech. "The board is concerned about market stability," he said, pacing. "Ming's team is pushing a narrative about cultural misunderstanding. If we apologize, smooth things over." "Smooth things over?" Naomi's voice could have frozen flame. "They tried to kill us." "We don't know it was them," David said quickly. "Local police say it was probably opportunistic criminals." "Criminals who knew exactly when we'd be reviewing sensitive documents?" Kiana cut in. "Who moved like trained fighters?" David's hand went to his tie, adjusting it nervously. The motion made his sleeve ride up slightly, and Naomi's breath caught. There, partly hidden by his watch, was a healing scratch, red and recent. Memory clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. The golden cufflink she'd found in the wreckage of her hotel room. The same custom design she'd seen David wearing at last month's board meeting. Her mind raced through the implications, each revelation more damning than the last. "You're right," Naomi said, keeping her voice steady through sheer will. "We need to handle this carefully. Give me the weekend to review our options." Relief flooded David's face. He hadn't noticed her staring at his wrist. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. We can draft a statement, maybe arrange a private meeting with Ming." "Monday," she cut him off. "We'll discuss everything Monday." After he left, Kiana turned to her. "You saw something." His wrist. Naomi's hands clenched the edge of her desk. "And I remember something else now. During the attack, one of them hesitated when I swung the lamp, pulled back instead of following through. Like he didn't actually want to hurt me." Understanding dawned on Kiana's face. "You think David was there? In Beijing?" "I think David's been playing both sides for a while." Naomi opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keys. "Those patent changes didn't happen by accident. The attack wasn't just about stopping us from exposing Zhao's corruption. It was about destroying evidence of David's involvement." They worked through the evening, sending the security team home to avoid suspicion. Thunder rolled outside as night fell, rain lashing against the windows. Naomi's cybersecurity team had given her specialized tools for emergencies, programs that could crack encrypted emails without leaving traces. "There," Kiana said at last, pointing to her screen. "Hidden account, routing through servers in Singapore." Naomi's jaw tightened as she read. Dozens of messages between David and Ming stretching back months. Plans to manipulate contract terms. Warnings about her investigation. Details about her schedule in Beijing. "She's too dangerous to control," Naomi read aloud, voice hard as steel. "The parent company won't act. We need to handle this ourselves." The final email was dated the night before the attack. David's response was simple. Whatever it takes. Rain drummed against the windows as Naomi stared at the evidence of betrayal. Her CFO, someone she'd trusted, promoted, defended to the board, had conspired with Ming to destroy her. Had been in that hotel room, watching as his hired thugs tried to terrorize her into silence. "Send copies to secure storage," she told Kiana. "Then contact legal," quietly. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating their reflection in the dark windows. In that stark moment, Naomi saw herself clearly. No longer the poised CEO trying to work within the system, but a warrior who'd been forced to fight. David and Ming had chosen violence over respect, betrayal over honor. She touched the bruises hidden beneath her sleeve, feeling each one like a brand of resolve. They'd thought her soft, thought they could break her with fists and fear. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Atlanta skyline glittered through the wall of windows in Naomi's office, a constellation of city lights stretching into the midnight darkness. She stood at the glass, hands clasped behind her back, watching her reflection overlay the urban landscape below. The bruises from Beijing had begun to fade, but the memory of that violence remained sharp as broken glass. Kiana sat at the conference table behind her, surrounded by laptops and tablets, her fingers moving across keyboards with practiced precision. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers testified to the hours they'd spent building their case. "The summit's scheduled for Thursday," Kiana said, checking her tablet. "Every major financial network will broadcast live. Ming's people are already confirming their attendance. They think it's your surrender speech." Naomi turned from the window, a slight smile touching her lips. They always underestimate what they fear. That's their weakness. She moved to the table, each step measured and deliberate. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she reached for a tablet, reviewing their gathered evidence. The screen displayed a folder structure that represented months of careful documentation, financial records, email chains, surveillance footage, and audio files, all meticulously organized. "Walk me through the presentation order again," Naomi said, settling into her chair. Kiana pulled up a timeline on the main screen. "We open with the partnership proposal. Everything clean and above board. Then we show the altered contract terms David secretly inserted." She swiped to the next slide. "That leads us to the money trail. Shell companies, hidden accounts, the works. And the labor violations? Documented with photos, witness statements, and satellite imagery." Kiana's voice hardened. "They can't deny what we caught from space." Naomi nodded, scrolling through secure folders on her laptop. She'd built redundant backups of everything, stored in different locations around the world. After the attack in Beijing, she'd learned the value of paranoid preparation. "The key is timing," Naomi said, pulling up another file. "We need to control the narrative from the first moment. No time for their spin doctors to react." They spent the next hour fine-tuning the presentation sequence. Each revelation would build on the last, constructing an irrefutable case of corruption, racism, and violence. The evidence would unspool like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of justice. "What about the audio?" Kiana asked quietly. Naomi opened a secured file, labeled only with a timestamp. The waveform appeared on screen, spikes and valleys representing Ming's voice at the fatal dinner. His Mandarin slur, preserved in pristine digital clarity, waited like a loaded weapon. "We save it for the end," Naomi said, studying the audio pattern. "After we've shown the corruption, the theft attempts, the attack, let them see the rot at their core, before we expose the hatred in their hearts." She thought about her mother, who'd spent decades cleaning other people's houses with quiet dignity, who'd taught her that education was armor, that excellence was revenge, that patience was power. The memory of Ming's sneering face floated in her mind, his casual cruelty, his assumption of superiority. Check the investor list again, Naomi instructed, pushing the memory aside. I want to know exactly who'll be in that room. Kiana pulled up profiles on her tablet. Most of the major funds confirmed. European pension managers, Gulf state sovereign wealth representatives, Asian development banks. She paused, scrolling. Even the Chinese State Investment Corporation. Good. Naomi stood, walking to a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and connections. They need to see this isn't about East versus West. It's about right versus wrong. Truth versus lies. They spent another hour pressure-testing their strategy, examining every possible counter-argument or technical glitch. Naomi had learned long ago that excellence required obsessive attention to detail. No one ever gave her the benefit of the doubt. She had to be perfect. Server redundancy? She asked, reviewing their checklist. Triple backup, Kiana confirmed. If they try to cut the feed, we have instant failovers ready, and hard copies of everything will be under each seat in sealed envelopes. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. They'd thought her soft, thought they could bully her into silence. Instead, they'd taught her to be bulletproof. The city lights continued their silent dance beyond the windows as midnight deepened toward dawn. Naomi returned to her laptop, opening the audio file one last time. She adjusted her headphones, wanting to be absolutely certain of the quality. Ming's voice filled her ears, the Mandarin syllables precise and poisonous. Hey Nu Yong Ren, black servant. She could hear the smirk in his voice, the absolute certainty of his superiority. In the background, nervous laughter rippled from his audience of sycophants and cowards. Naomi's finger hovered over the trackpad, her reflection in the screen steady and resolute. The woman looking back at her wasn't angry anymore. She was focused, determined, unstoppable. She'd transformed their hatred into fuel, their violence into purpose. The audio waves pulsed on screen, waiting to be unleashed. One click would start an avalanche that would bury Ming, David, and their entire corrupt empire. Not with fury or vengeance, but with truth and unshakable evidence. She pressed play once, listening to the slur again. Then she closed the laptop with a quiet click. Tomorrow, she said, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. They kneel. The video wall in Naomi's executive conference room displayed a grid of faces, power brokers and kingmakers from every corner of the global finance world. Their expressions ranged from polite interest to barely concealed boredom. They thought they were here to witness her capitulation, her career's quiet death. Naomi stood before the cameras in a crisp white suit, her posture relaxed but commanding. Kiana sat off-camera, monitoring the technical feeds and backup systems. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow across the polished conference table. "Thank you all for joining us," Naomi began, her voice steady and clear. "I've called this summit to address recent events and share some crucial information about the proposed Zhao Industries partnership." Ming's face appeared in one of the larger video panels, broadcasting from his father's ornate office in Beijing. He wore a practiced smile, probably expecting her to apologize, to beg forgiveness for her emotional outburst. Chairman Zhao sat behind him, face impassive as stone. "Let's begin with the original partnership agreement," Naomi said, sharing her screen. The contract appeared, its terms highlighted in blue. This was the version we initially discussed. She clicked forward. New text appeared, marked in red. "And these are the alterations secretly inserted the night before signing. Notice the changed patent transfer clauses, the modified ownership structures." Murmurs rippled through the virtual gathering. Ming's smile flickered but held. "Our investigation revealed these changes were designed to facilitate illegal technology transfers through a network of shell companies." Another click brought up a complex web of financial flows. This structure, centered around Ocean Bright Holdings Limited, connects directly to accounts controlled by Zhao Ming. The murmurs grew louder. Ming's smile vanished entirely. But this was just the surface, Naomi continued, her pace measured and relentless. Our team uncovered systematic fraud dating back years. She began sharing document after document, forged audit reports, falsified safety inspections, bribery payments disguised as consulting fees. These transfers, she highlighted a series of transactions, show payments to government officials through offshore accounts. The dates correspond exactly with approved permits for facilities that failed environmental impact assessments. Chairman Zhao finally stirred, leaning forward to whisper something to Ming. But Naomi was already moving to her next revelation. We also discovered evidence of forced labor at multiple Zhao facilities. Satellite photos appeared, along with internal memos and witness testimonies. Workers held against their will, passports confiscated, living in monitored dormitories. The investors' faces had transformed from boredom to shock to growing anger. Ming was typing frantically on his phone, probably trying to contact his damage control team. When we discovered these irregularities, Naomi said, her voice taking on an edge of steel, I raised concerns at a private dinner. The response was illuminating. Her finger hovered over the keyboard. In the brief pause, she met Ming's eyes through the screen. His face had gone pale, realization dawning too late. She pressed play. Ming's voice filled the conference room, his Mandarin words precise and poisonous. Hey Nu Yong Ren. The slur hung in the air like smoke. Then came the ripple of nervous laughter, the sound of glasses clinking, the moment of casual cruelty captured in perfect digital clarity. Naomi let the recording play to its end. Then she switched to Mandarin, her pronunciation flawless. You called me servant. Now serve your shame. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Investors began disconnecting one by one, their video panels going dark like lights being extinguished. Those who remained wore expressions of disgust and fury. On the financial ticker running along the bottom of the video wall, Zhao Industries' stock began to plummet. The numbers fell faster with each passing second, millions in value vanishing like mist in sunlight. Ming's face had gone from pale to ashen. Behind him, Chairman Zhao stood slowly, his expression a mask of contained rage. He reached for Ming's shoulder, his grip visibly tight, even through the video feed. The complete evidence package has been transmitted to relevant regulatory authorities in 12 countries, Naomi stated, switching back to English. You'll find copies in your secure inboxes, along with documentation of which agencies have been notified. Another wave of disconnections followed. The stock price continued its freefall. This concludes our presentation, Naomi said. Thank you for your time. She reached for the disconnect button, pausing for one final moment to meet Ming's devastated gaze. In his eyes, she saw the ruins of his empire, the ashes of his arrogance. Then she pressed the button, and his face vanished into digital darkness. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of electronics. Naomi stood motionless for a moment, feeling the weight of what she'd just accomplished settling around her shoulders. Years of corruption exposed, decades of privilege shattered, all with the simple power of truth. She drew in a deep breath, then released it, slowly. That's one empire gone, she whispered. Kiana began shutting down the systems, closing laptops and powering down screens. The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but it felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if the light itself had been purified by what had just transpired. The stock ticker continued its relentless descent, marking the destruction of billions in market value. But for Naomi, the numbers were secondary. She'd done what she'd set out to do, not just protect her company, but strike a blow against the kind of casual hatred that had haunted her entire career. She reached for her water glass, took a small sip, and watched as the financial world absorbed the shockwaves of what she'd just unleashed. In Beijing, phones would be ringing, lawyers would be scrambling, and Ming would be facing his father's wrath. But here in Atlanta, in this quiet conference room, Naomi had finally proven what her mother had always taught her. Excellence, truly, was the best revenge. The first video appeared just 3 hours after the summit ended. Shaky footage showed what looked like Naomi shoving a Chinese staff member during her Beijing visit. By noon, dozens more had surfaced, all grainy, all misleading, all carefully edited to paint her as volatile and aggressive. Naomi stood at her office window, watching dark clouds gather over Atlanta's skyline. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, each one bringing a fresh wave of anonymous hatred. The messages ranged from racial slurs to detailed death threats, filling her inbox like poison. "They're using deep fakes," Kiana said from her desk, scrolling through the latest batch of videos. "Good ones, but they're fake. Look at how your shoulder clips through the wall in this one." "Save everything," Naomi replied, her voice calm despite the storm brewing both outside and online. "Every threat, every video, every comment. We'll need it all." Her computer chimed with an urgent email notification. The subject line read, "Internal Memo. Ellison Global Corruption Exposed." The sender was listed as Anonymous Whistleblower, but Naomi knew better. She'd recognize David Levin's writing style anywhere. The attached documents were masterfully crafted. Memos that seemed to show her approving illegal payments, backdated emails discussing technology theft, even a fake recording of her planning to sabotage the Zhao deal from the start. It was the kind of paper trail that could destroy careers, the kind that took weeks to prepare. "He's been planning this," Naomi said, forwarding the files to her secure server. "These forgeries are too good for rush work. David's been Ming's inside man all along." Kiana moved to Naomi's computer, examining the documents. The metadata shows some of these were created months ago. He's been building this trap since before the Beijing trip. And now he thinks he's sprung it. Naomi pulled up a different folder on her screen, one containing every email David had ever sent from his corporate account, including the ones he thought he'd deleted. "But I've been building my own trap, too." She opened the first email chain between David and Ming, dated 6 months earlier. The messages started innocently enough. Casual business discussions, harmless information sharing. But they grew darker over time, more explicit in their planning. The final exchanges discussed exact dollar amounts for David's cooperation, offshore account numbers, and detailed instructions for sabotaging Naomi's position. "Send it all to the FBI," Naomi instructed. "Every email, every attachment, every deleted draft. And copy the SEC on everything related to the stock manipulation they planned." Kiana's fingers flew across the keyboard, transmitting years of evidence to federal authorities. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky as the storm finally broke. David's office door opened across the hall. He emerged wearing his usual polished smile, straightening his tie as he walked toward Naomi's door. She could see the confidence in his stride. He thought he had her cornered. "Naomi," he said, entering without knocking. "We need to discuss damage control. These allegations are extremely serious." She turned from the window slowly, letting him see her complete lack of concern. "Yes, they are. Especially the federal ones." His smile flickered. "Federal? The FBI's Cybercrimes Division is particularly interested in your conversations with Ming about hacking our servers." She picked up her phone, showing him the screen. "They just confirmed receipt of all the evidence. They're very efficient." The color drained from David's face. "Those emails were deleted." "Nothing's ever really deleted, David. You taught me that, remember?" Back when you were still pretending to be my mentor instead of Ming's puppet. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. 2 FBI agents appeared in the doorway, their badges gleaming. Behind them stood several uniformed police officers. "David Levin?" one agent said. "We need you to come with us." David's mask of corporate calm shattered completely. "This is ridiculous. I'm the CFO of this company. You can't just—" "They can, and they will," Naomi cut in. "Corporate espionage, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit cybercrime. Those are federal charges, David. And that's before we get to the attempted theft of classified green energy patents." The agents moved forward, handcuffs ready. David backed away, looking desperately around the room as if seeking escape. "You don't understand. They made me do it." Ming said, "Save it for your testimony," the agent said, securing the cuffs around David's wrists. "You'll have plenty of time to explain everything." Camera flashes began popping through the windows as David was led out. News vans had already gathered below, tipped off about the FBI's arrival. The whole world would see David Levin's walk of shame. Naomi stood at her window, watching as they guided him through the gauntlet of reporters. His perfectly tailored suit looked wrong somehow with his hands cuffed behind his back. More flashes lit up the scene despite the rain, capturing his downfall for tomorrow's headlines. She didn't blink once as she watched him being placed in the FBI vehicle. This was what justice looked like, not loud or dramatic, but methodical and inescapable. All those years of David's subtle condescension, his hidden prejudices barely masked by corporate politeness, had led to this moment. The car pulled away, leaving only rain-soaked reporters and their disappointed cameras. Naomi remained at the window, her reflection calm and steady in the glass. In less than a day, she'd toppled a corrupt empire in Beijing and exposed a traitor in her own ranks. But she knew this wasn't the end. Power never surrendered quietly, and wounded predators were the most dangerous kind. Streetlights cast long shadows across the empty Atlanta roads as Naomi guided her Mercedes through the quiet night. The day's victory felt distant now, replaced by a familiar wariness that had followed her since Beijing. Her hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror, a habit she'd developed since the hotel attack. The digital clock on her dashboard read 11:43 p.m. Most of the office buildings around her were dark, their windows reflecting the occasional flash of her taillights. She'd stayed late finalizing statements about David's arrest, making sure every word was precise, unassailable. Movement in her mirror caught her attention. Headlights, high and aggressive, belonging to a black SUV that had turned onto the street behind her. Something about its presence made her skin prickle. The vehicle kept pace, maintaining the same distance for 3 blocks straight. Naomi took a right turn, then another, mapping escape routes in her mind. The SUV followed each move. Her suspicion hardened into certainty. This wasn't coincidence. Her foot pressed heavier on the gas pedal, but she kept her speed just under suspicious. No need to attract police attention, not when she needed mobility. The SUV suddenly accelerated, closing the gap between them. Its headlights filled her mirrors, bright enough to be blinding. Naomi's pulse quickened, but her movements remained controlled, deliberate. She'd faced worse than tailgaters. They approached an intersection where the road widened into 4 lanes. The SUV swerved into the left lane, pulling alongside her. Naomi caught a glimpse of dark figures inside, faces hidden in shadow. The vehicle surged forward, cutting sharply across her path. Tires screeched as Naomi hit the brakes. Her Mercedes skidded, stopping inches from the SUV's rear bumper. Before she could reverse, 2 men emerged from the vehicle. Their movements were practiced, purposeful. One carried a tire iron that gleamed dully under the streetlights. Time seemed to slow. Naomi saw every detail with crystalline clarity. The men's black gloves, their featureless dark clothing, the way they spread out to approach from both sides. She remembered the hotel room in Beijing, the sound of breaking glass, the feeling of being cornered. Not this time. Her foot slammed the accelerator before they could reach her doors. The Mercedes's engine roared to life, tires spinning against wet pavement. She yanked the wheel hard, aiming for the narrow gap between the SUV and the curb. Metal screamed against metal as her car scraped past their bumper. The impact sent her vehicle into a spin. Naomi turned into it, using the momentum to whip her car around 180 degrees. Her training from defensive driving courses took over, counter-steering, maintaining control, finding her exit. The Mercedes straightened out, facing the opposite direction, and she floored it. In her rearview mirror, she saw the men scrambling back to their vehicle. Their SUV's front bumper hung loose, damaged from the collision. She took a sharp turn down a residential side street, then another, weaving through the quiet neighborhood until she was certain she'd lost them. Her hands didn't shake as she pulled out her phone and dialed Kiana's number. The call connected after 2 rings. "They're still trying to finish it," Naomi said without preamble, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Black SUV, 2 men, armed. Just tried to run me off Peachtree." "I'm calling the police," Kiana replied immediately. "Where are you now?" "Safe, heading to the Midtown precinct." Naomi checked her mirrors again. Clear streets behind her. "Have our security team sweep my house before I go back. And get me the traffic camera footage from the last 20 minutes around Peachtree and 14th. She ended the call and drove directly to the police station. Officers were waiting outside when she arrived, Kiana's call having alerted them. They photographed the damage to her car, silver paint scraped along the passenger side, dents in the rear quarter panel where she'd hit the SUV. Detective Sarah Martinez took her statement in an interview room that smelled of old coffee. Naomi recounted every detail with precise clarity, her voice never wavering. The detective's pen scratched across her notepad, recording times, descriptions, sequence of events. "You're remarkably calm for someone who just survived an attempted assault," Martinez observed, studying Naomi's face. "Panic doesn't solve problems," Naomi replied. "Neither does fear. I need this documented so we can prove pattern and intent when you catch them." The detective nodded slowly. "This connects to the Beijing incident and today's arrest. They're escalating because they're desperate." Naomi met the detective's eyes. "I won't be intimidated into silence. Not by Ming, not by David, not by hired thugs in an SUV." It was nearly 2 a.m. when she finally returned home. Her security team had swept the property twice, installed additional cameras, and positioned guards at strategic points around the perimeter. She walked through her front door alone, refusing to let them escort her inside. This was her space, and she wouldn't let fear change how she lived in it. In her bedroom, Naomi changed out of her suit, hanging it carefully despite the late hour. The routine helped settle her mind, brought focus back to her breathing. She opened her safe and removed a matte black pistol, a Glock 19, chosen for reliability and precision. The weapon was familiar in her hands, a tool she'd hoped never to need, but had trained with extensively. She laid the pistol on her nightstand, checking that the safety was on, that a round was chambered. Her voice was barely a whisper in the quiet room, never again unarmed. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Naomi's home office as she reviewed a cryptic email that had arrived at 4:27 a.m. The message contained only flight details and a single line. "Ming seeks sanctuary in L.A. Handle with care." The sender's address was a string of numbers, but the digital signature carried traces of official Chinese government protocols. She took a slow sip of her morning coffee, considering the implications. The mighty Zhao Empire was fracturing, and someone high in Beijing's power structure wanted her to know about Ming's desperate move. It wasn't surprising. The Chinese government had always played a long game, and Ming's public humiliation had become an embarrassment they needed to contain. "Kiana," Naomi called to her assistant, who was working at a desk in the adjacent room, "get me Special Agent Thompson at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Kiana appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Already done. He's expecting your call in 10 minutes. And that source you asked me to verify? Definitely came through diplomatic channels. Someone's pulling strings in Beijing." Naomi nodded, unsurprised. Ming's father still has enemies from his rise to power. Now they smell blood in the water. She stood and walked to the window, watching her security team patrol the grounds. "What time does his flight land?" "Private jet touches down at LAX at 2:15 p.m. Pacific. He's traveling under an alias, Michael Jiang, but the passport photo matches." The corner of Naomi's mouth twitched upward. "Sloppy. He's running scared." She turned back to her desk and opened her laptop. "Get me everything on his known contacts in California. Business partners, property holdings, shell companies, especially anyone who might hide him." For the next hour, they built a detailed map of Ming's West Coast connections. The pattern was clear. He was trying to salvage relationships with American investors, probably hoping to rebuild his empire from abroad. But his hasty exit suggested he feared more than just financial ruin at home. At precisely 9:04 a.m., Naomi dialed Agent Thompson's secure line. His gruff voice answered on the first ring. "Dr. Ellison, I hear you've got something interesting for us." "Zhao Ming enters U.S. airspace in 5 hours, she said, without preamble. "He's carrying falsified travel documents and planning to meet with investors who helped him launder money through Nevada casinos last year." There was a pause on the line. "That's very specific intelligence. Your source is reliable?" "Reliable enough that the Chinese government wants him caught and sent home. They're cleaning house, Agent Thompson. Ming's not just running from bad press anymore." "Give me everything you have," Thompson said. Papers rustled in the background. "And, Dr. Ellison, watch your back. If he's desperate enough to flee China, he might try to settle scores first." Naomi thought of the tire iron gleaming under streetlights, the sound of breaking glass in Beijing. "My security's doubled since last night's attempt. Focus on catching him before he disappears into some billionaire's compound in Beverly Hills." She spent the next several hours coordinating with FBI teams, providing documentation of Ming's financial crimes that her investigators had uncovered. The evidence was damning. Wire transfers to terrorist-linked accounts, bribes to African officials, systematic theft of intellectual property. Ming hadn't just been arrogant. He'd been sloppy, leaving digital fingerprints across every scheme. At 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time, Kiana rushed into the office. His plane just began descent into LAX. FBI's in position. Naomi pulled up a secure video feed that Thompson had granted her access to. Multiple camera angles showed the private terminal where Ming's jet would taxi. Teams of agents in tactical gear took positions behind vehicles and buildings. The sleek Gulf Stream touched down right on schedule, its wheels sending up puffs of smoke against the California sunshine. It rolled to a stop near the private terminal, and for several long moments, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and a familiar figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Ming looked different from the arrogant man who had mocked her in Beijing. His designer suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He carried only a small leather briefcase, clutching it like a shield. As he descended the stairs, his eyes darted around nervously, searching for waiting cars or friendly faces. Instead, he found FBI agents emerging from every direction, weapons drawn. Ming froze halfway down the stairs, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Even through the grainy video feed, Naomi could read his lips as he shouted in Mandarin, demanding diplomatic immunity, threatening consequences. The agents were professional and efficient, securing him without drama. One removed the briefcase from his grip, while others cuffed his wrists. Ming's protests grew louder, more desperate, but the microphones picked up Agent Thompson's calm response. "Mr. Zhao, you're being detained for multiple violations of international banking laws. The Chinese government has already approved your immediate deportation." Naomi watched Ming's face as those last words registered. The color drained from his cheeks as he realized the truth. He wasn't being arrested. He was being sent back to face whatever punishment Beijing had prepared for his embarrassment of the state. "Get me the footage from his arrest," she told Kiana. "All angles, highest resolution possible. And find out who else was on that plane with him." "Already pulling it," Kiana replied, fingers flying across her tablet. "Preliminary passenger list shows 2 private security guards and a financial advisor. All 3 are being questioned." Naomi nodded, satisfied. On her screen, agents were leading Ming toward a waiting government vehicle. His shoulders had slumped, the fight draining out of him as the full weight of his situation sank in. Just before they put him in the car, he looked directly into one of the security cameras, as if he knew she would be watching. The Atlanta morning spilled golden light across the polished floors of Ellison Global's headquarters. 6 weeks had passed since Ming's arrest, and the business world was still reeling from the aftershocks. Naomi's heels clicked against marble as she walked through the main lobby, her pace measured and confident. The first person to notice her was a young intern sorting mail. His eyes widened, and he straightened up, hands fumbling with envelopes. Then others looked up from their desks and screens. A slow wave of recognition rippled through the open space. It started with a single pair of hands clapping, then another, until the sound swelled into thunderous applause. Employees emerged from offices and cubicles, their faces bright with admiration and respect. Some had tears in their eyes. Naomi maintained her composure, though her heart swelled. She nodded acknowledgments as she passed, occasionally touching a shoulder or returning a smile. These people had stood by her through the storm, never doubting, never wavering. In her office, Kiana waited with the morning briefings and a stack of messages. "Good morning, Dr. Ellison. The latest from Beijing. Zhao Industries stock has officially been delisted. Their board dissolved yesterday, and asset liquidation begins next week." "And the chairman?" Naomi asked, settling behind her desk. "Resigned in disgrace. The Chinese government's investigation found decades of corruption. He's under house arrest." Kiana's tablet chimed. "Oh, and Ming's federal indictment just came through. 37 counts of financial fraud, plus conspiracy charges. He's facing 20 years here if Beijing ever lets him leave their custody." Naomi allowed herself a small smile. An empire built on arrogance, torn down by its own pride. "Speaking of which," Kiana held up her tablet, "every major network wants you. Good Morning America, Today Show, 60 Minutes. They're offering primetime specials, exclusive sites downs." "No." Naomi's voice was firm but gentle. "They want to turn this into entertainment, Kiana. They want the angry black woman who brought down a dynasty. They want tears and drama and sound bites about revenge." "But your story could inspire so many people," Kiana protested. "Young women, especially women of color." "They don't need my face on TV," Naomi interrupted. "They need to see that truth still matters, that dignity and intelligence can defeat violence and hate." She gestured at the window, where morning sun painted the Atlanta skyline. "Let the facts speak for themselves. The stock prices, the criminal charges, the audit reports, that's the story." "Not me." Kiana nodded, understanding. "They wanted spectacle. We gave them truth." "Exactly." Naomi glanced at her watch. "I'm leaving early today. There's somewhere I need to be." The drive to her mother's old neighborhood took 30 minutes. The modest house where she'd grown up looked different now, restored to its original 1960s charm, with fresh paint and manicured flower beds. Naomi had bought it 3 years ago, keeping it as a quiet retreat from corporate life. Inside, afternoon light filtered through lace curtains her mother had hung decades ago. The furniture was mostly new, but certain pieces remained. The old piano where she'd practiced scales, the rocking chair where her mother had sat after long days cleaning other people's homes. Naomi moved through the rooms slowly, touching familiar walls. In her purse was a photograph taken at the fatal banquet in Beijing. She'd had it printed and framed, a moment captured just before Ming's insult, showing her seated at the head table, spine straight, eyes steady, wearing her mother's pearl necklace. On the mantel stood a black and white photograph of her mother as a young woman, wearing her domestic worker's uniform but radiating quiet dignity. Naomi placed the new frame beside it, the two images spanning generations of struggle and triumph. She stepped back, studying the visual echo between the photographs, the same proud posture, the same unflinching gaze. Her mother had taught her that dignity wasn't given. It was claimed, that education and excellence were weapons no one could take away. The last rays of sunset filled the room with soft amber light. Naomi touched both frames gently, feeling the weight of legacy in her fingertips. They used fists, she whispered to the quiet house, to her mother's memory, to her own reflection in the glass. We used truth, and when that failed, we used strength. The words settled into the peaceful air like a final piece clicking into place. Naomi gathered her things, took one last look at the photographs, and walked to the door. The security system beeped as she entered the code, and the lock clicked with satisfying finality. Outside, cricket song filled the warm Georgia evening. Her heels made soft sounds on the brick path as she walked to her car, her stride steady and sure, moving forward as she always had, one step at a time, unafraid, unbroken, unstoppable in her quiet power. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.